Hello to all my dear followers. I'd like to welcome you to a new chapter of What if Naruto trains to become a Genjutsu master alongside Kurenai? At the top right of the screen, I've left a card with a playlist showing all the chapters of this fanfic in order. Please, I ask for your likes and comments so I can bring you more chapters. Without further ado, enjoy.
Naruto looked up from his perch on the bridge. He stared, for a few seconds, at a spot on the bridge, drawing the attention of his teammates. Just as Sakura opened her mouth to say something, Kakashi appeared at the bridge in the exact spot Naruto was looking. Sakura's jaw dropped and Sasuke's jaw clenched. "You're late, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto stated. Kakashi looked down at Naruto. As Naruto's teammates started to get accustomed to his new tone of voice, and I smiled. I would have been on time, but a black cat crossed my path and caused me to go around the village instead of coming straight here, and on the way I saw a little old lady that needed help with her groceries," Kakashi said as the rest of his team simply looked at him like he was crazy. "Well, let's go get our mission for the day instead of training first. I think changing it up a bit today would be nice," Kakashi said. Team 7 just nodded in agreement while Naruto and Sasuke stood up from their respective stations. Naruto from the railing of the bridge and Sasuke from leaning on it. Sakura stood from watching Sasuke, and the three fell in behind Kakashi as the Jonin whipped out his orange book and began giggling perversely. Naruto's eye twitched from his sensei's giggling, but he ignored it as he began to think of what he had read about making Genjutsu, something he was eager to start doing as he already had many ideas down on paper about some jutsu he wanted to try to make. Genjutsu, opposed to ninjutsu, are relatively easy to produce. Because of ninjutsu's popularity, there have been many more shinobi that utilize that particular branch of the shinobi arts. However, there have been relatively few in comparison with the overall amount of shinobi who were capable of creating their own new ninjutsu. Even with the minor amount of shinobi who utilized genjutsu, almost all of them were capable of creating new genjutsu. Now, if genjutsu is much easier to create than ninjutsu, then why would genjutsu have so many less techniques? The reason for this is that with the hundreds of shinobi that have attempted and perfected creating jutsu for the ninjutsu branch of the shinobi arts, those techniques were passed on or copied through a variety of different means. Genjutsu, on the other hand, were harder to copy because many creators would layer their jutsu so that the target could never witness the genjutsu being applied or used. Another suspected way in which genjutsu were kept secret were that many genjutsu masters would never take on an apprentice for such a small amount of shinobi actually proved to have an aptitude and a willingness to specialize in genjutsu. As a result, there are few documented genjutsu. The main problem when creating genjutsu would be getting the initial hand signs for the technique in the correct sequence. For a genjutsu, hand signs are the crux upon which the technique is fated to succeed or fail. Much like ninjutsu, should a single hand sign be out of sequence, the genjutsu will not activate, or it may activate only to be something completely different from what the user had intended. This is because the hand signs arrange the flow of chakra that allow the genjutsu to be molded. If the chakra flow is wrong, then one's jutsu will not come out as intended. The process of creating genjutsu is a relatively short process. The first step is to imagine the scenery or the attribute that you wish to utilize in your technique. Once you have the idea for the jutsu in mind, you should utilize the hand signs within a sequence that would accurately activate the technique. The best way of discovering the sequence for a technique would be to find a master of genjutsu and ask them to help with their expertise in which hand signs to use. For genjutsu, hand signs equate more to the reality and the illusion you are trying to cast than for the movement of your chakra. The hand signs do mold your chakra, but it also directs what type of genjutsu may be used, one which affects the senses or simply fools the brain and not the body. Upon finding the correct sequence of hand signs, the genjutsu should be attempted on an opponent to ensure that the quality of the genjutsu is where it should be. Should it be inferior, one should add hand signs shown later to stabilize the illusion. Once this has been accomplished, you have created your own genjutsu, a relatively simple process that is not nearly as dangerous as making ninjutsu, which have a tendency to implode upon themselves when used incorrectly or for creating chakra burns. Naruto unconsciously smiled as he thought of how easy it should be to create a few of the genjutsu he already wanted to make. He was bouncing around in his head with excitement at how soon he might be able to create one with Kurenai's assistance. As he walked, he remained oblivious to how his team had noticed his wide smile and had relaxed because of his loss of frigidness. As they were coming up to the Hokage Tower, Naruto was brought out of his delusions of grandeur and noticed that he had started to smile. Almost instantly, his relaxed posture and smile disappeared behind his icy blue eyes and straightened back, giving him the position of being at the ready. Just as quickly as his countenance changed, did the tension in the air surrounding Team 7 return, and again Kakashi shifted uncomfortably at how much they relied upon Naruto as their mood controller. Just as they entered the wide expanse in front of the Hokage Tower, Naruto's head snapped to the right as he looked at a fellow entrance. His sensor ability picking up a chakra signature he was familiar with, as it was not gray either, but a lighter blue than Kurenai's. He cocked his head to the side in confusion as he waited for the source of the chakra to emerge. The rest of his team had continued on for a few steps before realizing that Naruto was still standing in the middle of the wide expanse. "Naruto!" Sakura called out to him. "Come on, or we are going to be stuck capturing Tora the cat again." Naruto shuddered and Sakura's face broke into a grin at affecting her less than emotional teammate for the first time in weeks, before she realized Naruto still didn't move. Kakashi himself almost spoke up when he too turned to where Naruto was looking and noticed that Team 10 had just entered the clearing. Naruto's icy blue eyes scanned over the group and locked with Shikamaru's own before Naruto's face broke into a small grin and he relaxed slightly, obviously waiting for something. As Team 10 was walking, Naruto took the time to scrutinize Ino and Chuji since he hadn't before. "I should know my comrades if I need to imitate them in a genjutsu too," Naruto thought to himself. So he started with Ino. Her hair was a blonde much like his own, but it didn't seem to shine as much as his. It was tied into a ponytail with one bang hanging over half her face, concealing the right side of her face. Both of her light blue eyes locked onto Sakura, and sparks seemed to fly between the rivals of love. Her nose was daintily small compared to the rest of her face, and her jawline was rather feminine. Naruto felt a hint of pink rush to his face when he compared her to Sakura. Naruto blinked and the feeling was gone as he continued taking her attire in. On her arms, she wore warmers that went from mid-bicep to her wrists. Her dress was a two-piece purple shirt with 3 metal rings on her left breast, which led down to the medical tape wrapped midsection carrying on to her hips, upon which sat her skirt of the same purple leading down to her mid-thighs. On her feet were the standard shinobi sandals. Choji's brown hair stuck out in 2 tufts from his underwear-like headband, leading to 2 almost mouse-like ear-looking pieces of hair. His eyes were slightly slanted, but the only thing notable about them was they were a small and beady black color. His cheeks had swirls upon them, like most Akimichi. He had a white scarf tied around his neck which fell down to about his knees behind him. His shirt was cream-colored with his clan emblem emblazoned on the middle of his chest with a Lgith green jacket over it. His arms and legs were taped up with medical gauze and his feet were covered by the normal shinobi sandals. His dark gray shorts fell to his knees and, to finish his outfit, he wore earrings within his ears. By this time, Team 10 had followed Shikamaru to where Naruto was standing and Naruto's own team was walking back towards them. "Yo, Shika," Naruto said in greeting. "Troublesome Naruto." Shikamaru drawled out, looking at the iciness within Naruto's eyes, having rarely seen it before. Naruto turned to the rest of the team. "Nice to see you again, Ino-chan, Chuji," he said as he plastered a smile on his face that didn't look a bit fake to anyone but Shikamaru. "Asuma-san, how are you?" he added as he noted the smoking Jonin in the back, who smiled back at Naruto and nodded his head in answer. Ino ignored Naruto in favor of glaring at Sakura and yelling out, "Good morning, Sasuke-kun," before she seemed to materialize right next to him and Sakura started to bicker between the two of them over Sasuke. It must have been so lonely being only with Forehead and Naruto. "I am so sorry I am not on your team, Sasuke-kun," Ino managed to get out before Naruto tuned her out. Chuji, on the other hand, spoke through his munches. "Hey Naruto. Nice threads. Munch munch munch, sorry about. Munch, leaving so soon. Munch, that training day but that match against Shikamaru was, munch munch, awesome. By the way, Munch, Mom says come visit more often," he offered, and Naruto's smile seemed to lose some frigidness as he nodded to Chuji. By this time, Kakashi and Asuma shared a look that was not missed by Shikamaru. "Thanks, Chuji. And tell your mom I said thanks too, okay?" Naruto asked nicely. Chuji nodded as Asuma spoke. "What match with Shikamaru, Naruto?" he asked. Naruto and Shikamaru looked up. A shogi match sensei, troublesome blonde, managed to give me a good game. Shikamaru drawled out as he cast a bit of a glance at Naruto as he cautioned, ignoring Asuma's hacking cough from him, inhaling too much of his cigarette in disbelief. Game today, Naruto? Shikamaru asked. Naruto thought for a moment. Kurenai did agree that I should keep my new area of expertise a secret, so I can't walk her home and I will have some extra time. Why not? Naruto nodded and Shikamaru's shoulders slumped as he regained his lazy posture. Well, I think it's time for grabbing our mission. Kakashi spoke as Sakura and Ino finally stopped glaring at each other and realized Sasuke was standing next to Kakashi along with the rest of their teams, as they seemed to be all by themselves. The both of them shot one last glare at their rivals before rejoining their respective teams. Scene break. The two teams parted ways after having grabbed their missions from Chunin again, and Team 7 headed to the farm they were to help that was near the edge of the city limits. As they walked, Kakashi noted that Naruto's slightly less frigidness had dissolved when they left the presence of Team 10 and decided to get some information about when Naruto had become friends with them, as he didn't know about said friendship. After all, a sensei should know all about his students, so he knew their capabilities, right? So, he walked up next to Naruto, his nose still buried in his book as he spoke in a drawling tone of voice much like Shikamaru's. So, Naruto? He noted Naruto looked up at him, his icy blue eyes remaining so and causing a mental flinch from how much coldness seemed to be reflected within them as opposed to how bright the boy had been. When did you become friends with Shikamaru-san and Chuji-san? Naruto simply looked away from Kakashi as he responded. If you really wanted to know, you wouldn't be reading your perverted book while trying to talk to me, he retorted coldly. Kakashi had to blink at the sudden frigidness he had exuded directly towards himself. Up until yesterday, Naruto hadn't really been too cold to him, specifically more just to his teammates in reaction to their own actions, but the way he spoke to Kakashi just now had never been seen before. Kakashi suspected it was because Naruto might be jealous because he had offered training to Sasuke and hadn't been able to help Naruto himself. He had asked the Hokage for access to the Uzumaki scrolls within the Hokage vault, but the Sandaime had said that only Naruto himself would be able to open the scrolls now that he was an adult, and they couldn't risk him realizing that he was from a clan and start to try to find his parents. It would be disastrous if he managed to figure it out and inform the wrong people. Kakashi had argued that they would be able to get some blood from Naruto by accidentally hurting him in practice or some other ruse to gather it, but the Sandaime had refused that idea readily. Kakashi didn't understand why the Sandaime would be stonewalling him so well for Naruto's training, but who was he to argue with the Hokage? He had the interests of Konoha and Naruto in mind, so he accepted the Sandaime's actions. Though he did extract a promise that if Naruto ever got hurt and Kakashi wound up with some blood from it, he could access the scrolls then. But that wouldn't be until a few C-ranks into their careers, which wouldn't be for a few months at best. Kakashi was also a little surprised at how Naruto was detracting from the subject of his question by diverting it into a rib against himself and the content of what he reads. But he is a genius for a reason. Oh ho! Another reader of the goodness that is Ika paradise, Kakashi said with an eye smile at his student, though he was inwardly wondering if Naruto actually knew what sex is without having parents to explain it. I didn't know you read it, Naruto. Naruto spared a cold glare at his sensei as he said, I don't. I just know that every woman hates that book, and the only thing all women hate are perverts. Sakura and Sasuke looked on as their teammate initiated a battle of words with their sensei. Now that's not true, Kakashi stated as if all women didn't hate his book. Not every woman hates perverts, he said with an eye smile. Sakura glared at her sensei as Sasuke broke into a slight grin and Naruto snorted. Right? Naruto drew out as they arrived at the farm. Kakashi noted that he had never answered his question and resolved to find out later as his team walked up to the farm door and he knocked on it. The farmer came out and smiled at Kakashi. Ah, my farmhands are here today. Well, y'all can start out back picking the carrots and I will come see you in a few hours, he said as he turned to go back into the farm, but his eye caught sight of Naruto standing in the back and he turned right back around, facing Kakashi. On second thought, I need someone to shovel some manure from my old compost heap to the new one I want to make. Think I could have that blonde-haired kid to do that for me? He asked politely, while pointing out the old compost heap and the new area on the other side of the farmland. But Kakashi and Naruto both saw the underlying gleam in his eye. Kakashi internally sighed as Naruto's ice-cold eyes bored into his sensei's head, while Kakashi nodded. He couldn't deny the man because he was the client, no matter how much he may want to. Kakashi turned around after the farmer had closed the door, and he opened his mouth to speak when he noticed Naruto was already gone. He sighed internally again, and I smiled at his other two genin, who seemed rather smug at knowing they didn't have to shovel manure. "You heard the man, get to work," he said as his usually chipper mood was replaced with a more serious countenance at how they were enjoying their teammates' misfortune. Sakura and Sasuke marched off as Kakashi turned to the distance where Naruto must have headed to get to the old compost heap. His black eye shone with sadness at how his sensei's son was treated. "Minato-sensei, what would you say of the village?" he thought as he looked up at the sky. "What would you say of the Sandaime?" he asked as he looked at the Hokage monument. He sighed again and headed off to talk to Naruto. Scene break. Kakashi found Naruto laying on a bale of hay as he looked up at the sky with a leaf, seemingly, being pushed along the blonde's body. He stood there and observed the exercise, wondering why he was not doing his job as he had been rather proficient as of late, while also noting the technique would be rather intensive should he add more leaves. After waiting a few minutes, he decided to approach Naruto, and when he reached a few steps from him, Naruto spoke. "Yes, Kakashi-sensei?" he said. Kakashi didn't seem surprised, but he was slightly. He kept forgetting the boy was a censor. "I was wondering why you weren't doing your job," he said in a happy tone while smiling at his subordinate. Naruto didn't even open his eye, nor did his leaf stop moving as he pointed in one direction, which Kakashi followed to see a Kage Bunshin wheeling a wheelbarrow over for Naruto to use. Kakashi nodded and said, "Good thinking, Naruto, but D ranks are to build teamwork," he mentioned. Naruto actually opened an eye and scrutinized his sensei. His normally icy blue around his team had diminished slightly. "You do realize that you nullified the teamwork aspect when you separated me from my teammates by following the client's orders, right?" Naruto deadpanned as he internally patted himself on the back by using a couple of the words Shikamaru had taught him. Kakashi's sweat dropped as he face-bombed himself in his head at his blunder. "It seems I had forgotten about that. I suppose using your Kage Bunshin isn't going to harm this mission," he replied lamely. Naruto merely closed his eyes again and began concentrating on his sensor ability while doing the control technique. Kakashi didn't leave and spoke again. "Naruto, I am still curious about when you met Team 10. In a more serious tone than before, Naruto looked at his sensei again. He seemed to debate with himself for but a moment before. "I met them about 2 weeks ago. Shika and Chuji helped me out after I did," he replied. Kakashi frowned. "What did you need help with?" he asked, concerned. Naruto's blue eyes seemed to regain their frigidness as he looked at his sensei with a look of almost disbelief before it was hidden in an uncaring mask. "Nothing much, just some food issues," Naruto lied. Kakashi nodded his head as he accepted what Naruto said. It made sense. The Akimichi and Nara clans were renowned for fixing bad nutrition for shinobi, and, now that Kakashi thought about it, it would have been a good idea to talk to them about Naruto's eating habits. Though it seemed Naruto had already taken care of the problem himself. Kakashi didn't know to be pleased that Naruto had taken the initiative or disappointed that he hadn't come to his sensei for help. He smiled down at his student. "I'm glad you took the time to fix one of your own problems. But you know you can talk to me about anything, right? I am your sensei after all," Kakashi said in a happy yet serious voice. Naruto looked at him with an unreadable expression for a few moments before nodding and closing his eyes again to continue his training. Kakashi looked at Naruto scrupulously for a few moments before deciding to leave the blonde to his own devices for now. He trekked away to watch his other two genin while reading his book. Scene break. Naruto's casual facade faded to be replaced with a grim look upon his face when he sensed his sensei leave his sensor range. He was a little angry at how much it took to get Kakashi interested in him and not Sasuke. He was rather sure that Kakashi would have already known if Sasuke had made friends with another of his generation almost as soon as it happened. He would have known if Sasuke dash. Naruto shook his head to stop his thoughts. He wasn't one to brood over who was getting more or not. He had always gotten the short end of the stick, and he was content with his lot in life for now. He would grow strong under Kurenai's leadership and not Kakashi's. He was more than content to let Kakashi believe that he was his sensei while he trained without his knowledge. After all, if he was actually his sensei, he would have tested his abilities thoroughly and helped to correct them like Kurenai was. She may not have tested him, but it wasn't necessary as she was capable of detecting his flaws without testing them. For some reason, he closed his eyes and began to train his sensor again. It had grown in leaps and bounds in the range he could sense. Though he had only been training it for a few days, he had already tripled it from just a few feet to being able to sense chakra about a foot out. Though he still could only tell vague descriptions of who contained the chakra, his ability to feel different types of chakra was slowly being fine-tuned. As Naruto trained his sensor, his chakra control exercise was being utilized while his Kage Bunshin shoveled manure, so he didn't smell for his training session with Kurenai later on. A small smile crept along his face as he thought of what he might be learning later on today. Scene break. Naruto strode into his training clearing while humming a happy little tune. His happy mood attributed to the fact he got his paycheck plus his stipend today, so he had quite a bit of extra money at his house for this week. He did have some set aside for a rainy day, although he couldn't keep the smile off his face in the prospect of starting 2 different types of training today. His speed training and possibly making some genjutsu. His smile threatened to break his face in two as he looked at a spot within the clearing and spoke, "Heya Kurenai-sensei." Kurenai appeared a second later, within her shunshin, and looked at Naruto with a puzzled expression. "How did you know I was going to arrive here, sensei?" Naruto deadpanned as he looked at her. Kurenai at least had the decency to look sheepish as she was reminded about his bloodline. A slightly awkward silence filled the clearing as Kurenai wondered how she had forgotten her students. Potentially greatest asset, and Naruto simply stared at her with a deadpan expression from her question. It was broken when Naruto's face broke into a wide smile as he almost bounced on the tips of his feet while speaking loudly. "So, what are we going to do today?" he asked. Kurenai smiled slightly at how eager he was. "Well, today we are going to start with," she said as she looked at him through the corner of her eye. She noted he was leaning forward in excitement at what he was about to learn. A small smirk found its way onto her face. Stretching, Naruto face-planted and looked up at his sensei with an expression of disbelief while Kurenai giggled at how he looked. "Stretching?" Naruto asked dubiously. Kurenai nodded and Naruto stood up as she positioned herself in front of him. "Stretching is an important part of working out, Naruto. By stretching your muscles, it allows your blood to flow before you start any strenuous activity, while simultaneously allowing you to bend yourself during battle in ways others won't expect," Kurenai stated as she set her legs together so she looked like a tower and motioned for him to mimic her. He looked doubtful, but he followed her lead and she spoke. "Stretching will also allow your muscles to remain taut and not become too cumbersome, which would weigh you down while hindering your movements." As Kurenai finished speaking, she bent down at her waist and touched her toes. "For this pose, you will lean down and attempt to touch your toes while keeping your knees locked. Stop when you feel a slight burning in your lower leg muscles and hold it for as long as you can before standing up," Kurenai said as she returned to her full height. Naruto nodded and bent down, his fingertips reaching to his ankles but not quite able to reach his toes. "Good," Kurenai said as he held the pose. "You already seem a bit flexible, Naruto. If we continue this, it shouldn't take long for you to become limber," she appraised. Naruto seemed to brighten and held the pose for a good 30 seconds before Kurenai had him stand back up. "Don't spend too long on any certain stretch. We don't want you to strain one set of muscles too much." Kurenai then set her feet about shoulder-width apart and leant down to her right side as Naruto mimicked her action. "This will stretch your right leg. Just like before, stretch until you start to feel a slight burn, then stop and hold it for about 45 seconds before releasing it. Then we switch to the left leg." After 45 seconds had passed, Naruto and Kurenai switched legs and continued their stretching as Kurenai exhibited a few more leg stretches for him. Kurenai finally stood up and shook herself out to feel how her legs were stretched as Naruto did the same. "Next, I will show you a few arm stretches. These will mainly just allow you a wider range of movement with your arms. Now, grab both your hands and raise them above your head like you are making a platform with your palms facing away from your head." As Kurenai exhibited how it should be done, Naruto's eyes were drawn to her impressive bust, as the way her arms were put together emphasized her assets. His head swam, and a flash of how they had looked when he had first seen her flashed across his mind before noticing that Kurenai was looking at him expectantly. He hurriedly followed her example, hopeful she hadn't noticed his staring. After a few more stretches, all of which seemed to have emphasized her impressive bust and made it much harder for Naruto to concentrate for some reason he couldn't understand. "Why the hell do I keep seeing her naked breasts?" Naruto screamed to himself. "I should be training, not thinking these perverted things, only hentais do that," he told himself as he shook his head clear and paid closer attention to Kurenai. Kurenai nodded to him as he stood up. "That is all the stretches for now. Let's begin conditioning your muscles," she said. Naruto nodded and Kurenai led him to one side of the clearing. "Okay. I want you to run from one side of the clearing to the other, as fast as you can, and we will see where to go from there," Kurenai said. From there on, Naruto was drilled into conditioning for his speed training. Many different techniques were used to target certain parts of his muscles. One such training method had been for him to run up a hill to target his calf muscles. Every day he would train until he could feel his legs could go no more. Luckily, his bloodline seemed to improve his downtime and he increased by leaps and bounds in comparison to how Kurenai had expected him to. Scene break. Time skip 2.5 weeks. Naruto panted as he finished his daily workout, his legs shaky from the intense workout he had put them through. He reached down and rubbed his ankles through the weight that were strapped onto them. His body adapted quite quickly to his workout, so he had become much quicker, much faster than even he had ever dreamed of. Kurenai even said that he was as fast as a Jonin when he could take his weights off. He had almost preened from the praise Kurenai had been giving him and, as a result, he had trained even harder than ever before. His progress grew at an astonishing rate with a personalized teacher that was capable of working with his every need. It helped that he trusted her with every aspect of his training and told her anything that she might ask in the hopes it might help her train him better. He had already shown her a few Genjutsu ideas and she had praised each of their basics as the two worked together to fine-tune them and make them battle-capable. Though he had already succeeded in creating 3 of his own, they all required extremely long hand sign sequences to activate and he would have to work on them in order to be able to use them in combat. Naruto had learned that, though the process for creating Genjutsu was relatively simple when put on paper, just as ninjutsu creation seemed easy when first introduced, putting it into practice would have been nigh impossible without Kurenai's help. He wouldn't have even had an idea of where to begin, much less how to complete it. Despite how hard it was in practice, he had still managed to complete those techniques with Kurenai, so he was quite proud of himself in that area. Naruto had added up to 3 leaves to his personal control exercises and he had mastered the surface clinging technique while moving on to the water walking exercise. He could already walk on water, that had been much easier for him to master, something he attributed to his larger chakra pool. He had yet to master it, but his chakra control had never been better. Now, when he attempted to make 1 shadow clone, he would make 2 instead of the normal 5. For the amount of chakra that a shadow clone takes, that was very impressive, according to Kurenai. All this time, Naruto had only walked Kurenai to the edge of the training grounds before she would shun away to keep their master/apprentice relation a secret, as Naruto and Kurenai had agreed that hiding Naruto's true strength would be in his own best interest. Ignoring the general populace, it wouldn't be good for Kurenai to be found teaching another Jonin student without his permission, either. True, nothing could technically be done for it, but it would look bad on Kurenai, so Naruto agreed with that in mind, along with the idea of hiding it from his opponents at large. There was one snag on Naruto's training though. He had completed making the Genjutsus. However, he still couldn't seem to cast a single one. His control was seemingly inadequate for casting Genjutsu even despite his huge leap in his control. It frustrated him that he still could not cast a Genjutsu even though that was what he had been working for. When he cast the jutsu, it might catch for a short period of time, but he would lose control of his chakra right near the end, as if a flux of chakra from outside his pathways disrupted his jutsus. He and Kurenai were both at their wits' end on how to solve this dilemma. Team 7's teamwork, on the other hand, had never been better. Their mission record was flawless, and they never had anyone complain about them as they finished their job quickly, quietly, and efficiently. Kakashi had begun teaching Sasuke about chakra detection, and even Sakura had apparently been getting help from their sensei as her aptitude with medical jutsu was discovered. She couldn't heal anything beyond a small cut, but she was becoming useful in her own way. Naruto had been surprised to learn that she was learning such a thing since he didn't actually know what that was. He had seen his chakra books talk about control for medics, but he hadn't actually thought ninja were the medics. Though, she would be useless during a fight as her taijutsu still remained horribly subpar, and she had no genjutsu or ninjutsu to speak of besides the Academy 3. Sasuke had been mollified when Kakashi started to train him in chakra detection. Though the going seemed slow, from what Naruto could tell, Sasuke was pleased he was receiving training in something other than teamwork exercises and becoming stronger. Naruto was pleased that Sasuke's recent change from going into an even more introverted teammate to, not necessarily active but still would now work with Naruto more likely than ignore him as he had been doing. Even Kakashi had said that their teamwork was now back to what it was before Sasuke became jealous. He just said it a different way. Naruto had improved his kunai and shuriken accuracy though, something Kurenai had thought would be useful in distracting opponents along with his sash to allow for some more room to be put between him and his opponent when he managed to cast a genjutsu. She had taught him the hand signs for a few of the genjutsu that Konoha had acquired over the years, but they weren't very effective against anyone who was used to genjutsu. He was ecstatic upon learning them though, so he was not bothered by their little usefulness at all. He had even suggested a few uses that Kurenai hadn't thought of, something she praised him for. All in all, Naruto had gained very little in regards to training in genjutsu that he could use. He would be more useful in a fight because of his increased speed, something which hadn't come to his team's notice since Kakashi had forestalled any spars in favor of the teamwork exercises they had been doing. Other than that, his strength was pitiful in regards to any person with some taijutsu experience, and he knew very little ninjutsu. His sensor bloodline, however, was extremely improved. It had continued to grow by leaps and bounds upon his discovery, and he could now sense things to within 15 yards of himself if he concentrated. If he didn't, he had a constant area surrounding himself while on guard that allowed him to sense up to 6 yards away from him, and even if he was completely relaxed, 1 yard away from him. If he had time, he could sometimes pick out a color within the person's chakra system, like for Kakashi. His chakra color was light blue, but Naruto would see a whitish-purple color sometimes flicker inside his sensei. It perplexed him that he couldn't figure out what that meant, but Kurenai had asked him to check her own. He had been hesitant to do so because of what had happened last time. He actively searched for her chakra but complied and felt those same feelings being reinforced from before. As he plunged deeper, however, he noticed that she had a light blue color that was almost indistinguishable from her other chakra. He had managed to find it only after 20 minutes of constant observation, something he was sure he could only stand while looking at hers, or possibly Shikamaru's, chakra. After he had explained it to her, she had nodded and told him to disregard it for now, that she would explain that in one of their future sessions if Kakashi didn't explain it first. It was something that Naruto had been anxious to learn, and when Kurenai had told him that she knew what it was, he was almost bouncing around in anticipation. Her declaration of telling him she wouldn't explain it yet had dampened his mood, but he had only stared at her for a few minutes before nodding and acquiescing to what she felt was best. After all, she was his sensei. Naruto stopped contemplating on the past few weeks and slightly brooding over how he still couldn't cast a genjutsu, as he looked up at where his sensei appeared. He didn't say anything, nor did Sakura yell out at her sensei that he was late, as the three genin looked at their sensei expectantly, having gotten used to his antics and formed a semi-camaraderie. The team was nothing like what it had been when it was first formed, but their work was near flawless, competing with the legendary genin teams for completion records and approval comments. Kakashi smiled at his team. Since my cute little genin didn't yell at me today, how about we see if Hokage-sama has a C-rank mission for us today? He said as his smile increased further from how Sasuke perked up, and even Naruto's frosty eyes seemed to gain a glint of excitement. Naruto's frostiness had faded a little with Sasuke's warming up, and Kakashi was happy about that. He hoped they could form a good bond that wouldn't be broken even if Sasuke or Naruto ever got jealous again. He was still trying to get the Hokage to allow him access to the Uzumaki scrolls for Naruto, but the Hokage had effectively stonewalled him again. So, he was stuck with what to do about training Naruto, as he knew that Naruto really just needed basic training that he was going to introduce to the team as a whole. Finally! No more of these damn boring chores! Sakura exclaimed in a relieved voice. I agree, it is about time we do something more than chores. Our success rate is almost unmatched, Naruto said as he had taken to reading about various things that caught his interest in the history of Konoha book. He had also finished the rules for shinobi and had begun trying to integrate them into his life. Sasuke added. Kakashi almost sweat-dropped but simply kept his eyes smile as he turned to head to the Hokage tower after whipping out his own book. He was a bit surprised when Naruto whipped out a book and began following his sensei from behind. He smiled internally as he giggled perversely after reading a passage, along with seeing the dumbfounded expression on his other two genins' faces. "Naruto reads?" Sasuke asked almost incredulously. Sakura just nodded her head dumbly as her mouth did a nice imitation of a fish out of water. Unknown to any of them, Naruto smiled into his book as he sidestepped a pole. Observation skills were amazing, and this was one of the best ways of training it. He ignored the jab at his intelligence as it was expected. He realized that before he had met Shikamaru and Kurenai, he probably wouldn't even look twice at a book. Kurenai had mentioned she did something like this back when she first started, and he had decided it wouldn't be too obvious what he was training with Kakashi as his legitimate sensei. Sasuke and Sakura soon shook themselves of their shock, something which Naruto had been doing constantly for the past month and a half, and followed the rest of their team to the Hokage tower. Scene break. Kakashi and Naruto entered the Hokage tower with Sakura and Sasuke following them close behind. Sakura looked decidedly happy to be standing next to Sasuke, but the rest of her team could tell that she was also excited about a new mission. The whole team was ready to stop those damn chores that the Hokage dared to call missions. Sasuke was not being such a slouch either. To the casual observer, he seemed normal, but his team could tell that he was standing straighter and his shoulders seemed to be thrown back in pride at getting their first C rank. Kakashi glanced out of the side of his eye at Naruto. As had become normal, Naruto seemed to only have a frosty countenance with icy blue eyes skimming his book as he walked forward with all the confidence one would usually find only in experienced chunin. Kakashi mentally nodded. His team was ready. Naruto himself was a little curious if they would be cleared for this mission. Kurenai had mentioned she would have to tell the Hokage about Kakashi's neglect, but their mission record stood apart from anyone else's. He was also a little apprehensive about seeing his GG for the first time in almost 3 months. He felt a tightness in his chest as they ascended the stairs into the mission room where the Chunin were usually at for their daily missions. Naruto had thought it a bit odd that the Hokage hadn't seen his team once since their formation, but he wrote it off as the Hokage being very busy. He was not one to look at a gift and scoff at it. He hadn't wanted to see his GG. His feelings of betrayal from the only person he had seen as family was a huge blow to him, and he hadn't wanted to talk to him after having seen him following his registration approval and meeting Konohamaru. Naruto steeled himself as he allowed Kakashi to open the door and step inside before him. He let Sasuke and Sakura draw next to him as he placed his book away, and the 3 Genins stepped inside together. A show of unity that couldn't be missed with Sakura in the middle, Sasuke flanking her on her left and Naruto on her right. As they entered, they were treated to the sight of multiple piles of scrolls stacked on top of a U-shaped amount of tables. On their right was Umino Irika, who was acting as the Chunin assistant today, just as he had done a few times before. He was a rather unassuming Chunin who wore the usual flak jacket with a blue shirt and blue pants, a kunai holster on his right leg, along with blue shinobi sandals. His hitai was tied around the top of his head as his brown hair was tied up into a messy ponytail. On his face was a scar that traced from cheek to cheek across his nose. On their left stood simply some more stacks of mission scrolls. The room was rather plain itself, only holding a wooden floor and high ceiling with nothing adorning the wall except a large Konoha symbol behind the seat which had been unoccupied each time Team 7 had entered previously. The team advanced together to stand in front of the back end of the U-shape and Kakashi spoke. Team 7 reporting in for mission, Hokage-sama. The team watched as the most powerful man in the village of Konoha finally raised his head to address the young people in front of him. Naruto noticed the hat. First, the hat he wanted to wear one day. It was white with a veil falling around the back of it. The only deviation in color was a wedge of red that had a white circle with a red kanji for fire upon the crest of the hat. The rest of the elderly person's body that was shown was covered in white robes befitting and bestowing the office of Hokage, the fire shadow, and the leader of Konohagakure. His face was slowly revealed to the team and Irika. A short white beard appeared on his chin, which morphed into a withered jawline. Wrinkled skin led up to a wooden pipe set within a pair of equally wrinkled lips showcasing the age of this person. 2 liver spots appeared on his left cheek as it was brightened by the lights in the room. Finally, 3 lines, each trio underneath their own eye, appeared vertical lines going from the bottom of his eye to the top of his cheek. appeared as his black eyes flashed in the light, both of them shining with a wisdom none now living could hope to match. A few spikes of graying dark brown hair appeared from beneath the Kage hat. Sasuke and Sakura stare, slightly in awe at the man in front of them. A man they knew had fought through 2 shinobi wars and had remained undefeated all throughout his time as Hokage, still holding that impressive record to this day. The man strong enough to face down the Kyuubi no Kitsune in battle and managed to assist the Yondaime in defeating it. A man who held the title of the strongest ninja of Konohagakure for the longest and most successful reign of any Hokage before him. A man who is called Kami no Shinobi, God of Shinobi. Kakashi chuckles inwardly at Sasuke and Sakura's reaction, something every person finds amusing when knowing the Sandaime as well as he did, was seeing the reaction people have to him when they first meet him. He wasn't disappointed, as he watched his other genin. However, he missed the brief flashes of emotion running across Naruto's face. Naruto's ice-cold facade broke upon seeing his Gigi's eyes. He felt the rush of betrayal flash across his face and his hurt appear for a few seconds, something he was sure his Gigi caught if the slight tightening of his mouth was any indication. He schooled his features fast though. He had forgiven his Gigi for his actions, but he had not forgotten. It was hard to forgive him, but he had managed to do so. However, it would forever be in his memory of his Gigi lying to him repeatedly when he asked why he would be attacked by a mob those few times it had happened, or when parents would take their kids away. Since Naruto couldn't seem to control his emotions enough, he retreated behind his usual mask for his team, his icy blue eyes returning and his face set into an uncaring mask. Though if one knew Naruto well enough, you could see the hurt that was reflected in his eyes whenever he would look at his Gigi. If he took notice of how Irika and the Sandaime seemed to question why Naruto was so quiet and seemingly cold, he didn't show it. All of this took place in the few seconds it took the Sandaime to take a puff of his pipe and reach up to pluck it from his mouth. His sharp gaze bore into the genin in front of him. Ah, Sakura-chan? Sasuke-kun? Naruto-kun? What a pleasure to finally see you all as ninja. As Hokage, I welcome you to the shinobi ranks. I must apologize for my lateness, but my job has been pretty busy of late, the Sandaime said as he smiled benevolently at the team. Sakura bowed slightly and said, "Thank you, Hokage-sama." Sasuke bowed his head and replied, "Hokage-sama." Naruto himself just inclined his head. "Heya, Gigi, long time no see," he said in an impassive voice, something which caused the Sandaime to flinch slightly. Sakura turned to her teammate, a righteous flame in her eyes. "Naruto, show Hokage-sama the proper respect." She almost hissed out at him. Naruto turned his eyes on her and she almost flinched back but held her ground. Never did she miss his adoring look more than right now. "It's quite alright, Sakura-chan. I must say it is rather refreshing to see one person capable of seeing me beyond my position. How have you been, Naruto-kun?" the Sandaime asked politely. Sasuke's hands clenched and Sakura looked taken aback before shrugging her shoulders. Kakashi simply eye-smiled at the Sandaime. Naruto turned back to his Gigi and spoke. "Fine, Gigi, just hoping to get a mission," he said in his impassive voice. The Sandaime seemed to slump in his chair upon his answer. "Well, Irika-san, what do we have in the way of D-ranks today?" the Sandaime asked in a weary tone. "No," Sasuke declared. "No more chores. Kakashi says we are ready for a C rank. I am done doing these chores for those too lazy to do it themselves," Sasuke said. Kakashi sighed and Sakura had small hearts in her eyes as she looked at her crush. Naruto just seemed to accept the going-ons. "Now see here. The missions are broken up by experience and difficulty. There is a reason you genin can only take D-rank missions. The table is broken down by..." Irika started only to be looked at with uncaring eyes from the genin. "I don't care. I want something other than those damn D-ranks," Sasuke said again. Irika suddenly pulled out a scroll and unrolled it. He tacked it up to the wall and pulled out a pointer as he began to explain. "A-rank missions are for Jonin only. These high-profile and often dangerous missions include many different types of combat and require a Jounin skill and experience to complete successfully. B-rank missions are assigned to special Jounin and experienced Chunin who have the skill set required for this slightly less dangerous mission. C-rank missions are usually assigned to Chunin, however, An experienced Genin team can be assigned a C-rank mission, which is usually a non-shinobi combat mission. Finally, D-rank missions are assigned to newly minted and slightly experienced Genin to work on their teamwork and provide money to the village and themselves. These are often low priority. Irika explained as he pointed to each spot on the scroll depicting an A, B, C, D, and the ranks of Jonin, Special Jonin, Chunin, and Genin. He looked up to note that everyone had ignored him except the Sandaime and Naruto. He smiled at Naruto, but received a cold stare in response, causing his smile to falter. The Sandaime puffed on his pipe for a few moments while the Genin ignored Irika's finishing lecture and finally spoke. A very good breakdown of our missions, Irika-san. However, Kakashi, do you really think they are ready? He asked seriously as he eyed the Jounin. Kakashi nodded and looked at the Sandaime over his perverted book while replying, I believe they are. The Sandaime puffed his pipe a few more times. Sandaime-sama, you can't be serious that. Irika started only to be silenced as the Sandaime raised his hand. Very well, since your sensei thinks you capable, I have a C rank which should suit your team rather well. Irika-san, please go fetch their client. The Sandaime said as he handed Irika a scroll. Irika looked down and sighed as he nodded and stood to leave. Very well, Hokage-sama, he said before leaving the room. Team 7 and their sensei stood in the mission room for Konohagakure with the Hokage sitting in his chair peacefully smoking his pipe while awaiting their client for their first C-ranked mission. The tension was palpable in the air as Sasuke and Sakura were anxious, while their final teammate seemed to have retreated into himself. Naruto had put his cold mask back on. Before his revelation about the truth of how his teammates viewed and treated him, his emotions were always controlled through his methods of pranking or garnering attention to himself through his loudmouth happy persona. Recently, he had dropped the happy persona that maintained his innocence throughout his lonely childhood and embraced the darker aspects of his mind. Though he was not a brooder or a psychopath, far from it, he was much less likely to smile or to even grin in his happy manner. This new mask exuded a cold detachment that sent shivers down the spines of those who had come to love the bright ball of sunshine that Naruto had been. Though the change may be unwelcome for some, for Naruto, he did not see this as a mask so much as his shinobi mode. A frame of mind that would allow him to analyze his situation properly to prepare for combat before it even occurred. As a Genjutsu user, this was an essential trait to have. Though he may look detached, Naruto's eyes took in every ounce of detail so as to better utilize his surroundings for his fights. His spars with Kurenai had shown him just how effective surprise could be on an opponent. When he could manage to surprise Kurenai, he could tell he could land a killing blow upon her as easily as she could anytime he did not. He knew that his emotions were locked away for the most part, but he was not sure how to deal with his Gigi just yet and felt that showing his new prowess as a shinobi would make the old man proud of him. Even if Naruto felt betrayed, he still felt close to the old man who had been a figure in his life ever since he could remember. He was surprised when his Gigi, instead of looking proud, seemed to slump into his chair upon seeing his actions. He almost reverted back to his loud persona, but he crushed that when the C rank was mentioned, he couldn't afford to look foolish in front of the client. It wasn't much longer before Irika opened the door and ushered in an elderly-looking man with a jug of what smelled like sake in his hand. His hair was a spiky gray, indicating his advanced age, with a beard and mustache combination upon his chin and upper lip creating a circle of gray hairs around his mouth. He wore a pair of glasses which rested upon the bridge of his nose, showcasing his black eyes. His shirt and pants were nondescript gray clothing that could be found in many places, but the shirt was sleeveless. Ah, Tsunade-san, welcome, the Sandaime said as he straightened in his seat while looking at his client. The now-named client glanced at the Hokage before looking at Team 7 and scoffing. All this money I paid and I'm getting protected by these brats? He slurred drunkenly before he took another swallow of his jug of sake and looked to the Hokage. They barely look like they can protect themselves, much less anyone as super as I am. He took another swallow of sake as Sasuke, and Sakura glared at the man's brashness. Naruto had a little twitch in his eye as he looked at the drunken man while Kakashi observed his team. I assure you, Tsunade-san, Team 7 is one of our most promising genin teams in years. They will protect you from any encounters you may find upon your road to your home, the Hokage assured the client. Tsunade scoffed before taking yet another swallow of sake and teetering slightly while saying, Tage, I doubt it. They all look like they are ready to soil themselves, especially that shrimp over there, he said drunkenly. Sasuke and Sakura stopped glaring as they looked at Naruto for his reaction. The look of confusion, instead of his normally icy blue eyes, was something they weren't used to, and with a small bit of amusement, they stepped next to him to show he was still the shortest of their group. His icy blue eyes returned full force as he looked at the client. It would be wise not to underestimate us, Tsunade-san, Naruto said in a cold voice which sent shivers down the man's back as he suddenly turned around to see that the blonde was behind him. Shinobi are not meant to look intimidating. Naruto quoted from the Shinobi Rules book. Something he learned early on while reading the rules, deception was key. His team merely smirked from their position as Tsunade began to shake slightly. They were a little surprised with how fast he had moved, but it wasn't too fast, just fast to civilians. He was probably a little slower than Sasuke when he had moved. Kakashi smiled as he looked at Naruto holding a jug of sake. I believe being drunk is against protection details. Correct, Gigi? Naruto said coldly as he smashed the jug of sake on the ground, oblivious to Tsunade's wide eyes. The Sandaime chuckled. There's the Naruto he knew, even if it was a bit different from normal. Yes, that is right, Naruto-kun. I believe you should report to the medical ninja before you leave the tower, Team 7, to detoxify your client. The Hokage advised. Kakashi nodded and put his book away as Naruto returned to standing next to his teammates while Tsunade watched him warily. They will do, Hokage-sama. Thank you, the drunk old man finally said when Naruto rejoined his teammates. The Hokage chuckled slightly before returning to a serious expression. Team 7. Kakashi and his Jonin snapped to attention. Your mission is to protect this bridge builder, Tsunade-san, on your trip to Wave Country and during the construction of his bridge. The rank for this mission is C. More details will be given in your personal files upon acceptance of this mission. Do you accept given these conditions? He asked seriously. Hi, Hokage-sama. The 4 shinobi chorused. The Hokage nodded and handed a folder to Kakashi before the 4 ninja bowed, and they led Tsunade out of the mission room. Team 7 walked downstairs until they reached the medical area within the Hokage tower. Kakashi motioned for the team to wait outside as he walked inside with Tsunade. About 15 minutes later, Kakashi returned with a sober-looking Tsunade who was grumbling about brats who break his jugs of sake. Sakura giggled and Kakashi smiled as Sasuke grinned at the bridge builder. Naruto simply ignored him as he looked at his sensei. Meet at the East Village gates in a half hour and we will leave for Wave Country. Pack for close to a month, Kakashi said as he turned to leave with Tsunade. Kakashi-sensei, what should we pack? Naruto's voice rang out as Kakashi turned around, a bit surprised at being questioned. He smiled. Kunai, shuriken, smoke bombs, some ninja wire would be recommended. If you can, use storage scrolls to lighten your load. Obviously, some clothes and extra sets. We might have very limited options in where we can wash, so bring as many outfits as possible without weighing yourself down too much. A tent, sleeping bag, and some cooking supplies, Kakashi said. The team nodded and they all left the tower before heading in their own directions to their homes. Scene break. Naruto walked into his apartment and pulled out the storage scrolls that he had bought when he saved enough money up. Kakashi had actually taught them to use it a few days ago. Now, Naruto knew that it was in preparation for this mission. He quickly began to seal away all of the 12 pairs of clothes he had, even sealing his last jumpsuit in case he ran out of clean clothes. Next, he grabbed his pots and pans. He had learned some cooking after realizing he couldn't eat out every day and found he was pretty happy with his own results. Finally, he opened a new box of kunai and shuriken which were sharper and better quality than what he had been using, making his accuracy rate with them improve. He had wanted to get a new tent and sleeping bag, but his mission money hadn't come through for that yet, and he was stuck going without one for this mission. He smiled and rechecked everything before beginning to lock up his apartment. He had spent a good 15 minutes getting all of this ready and decided that he would spend the next 10 minutes trying to find Kurenai to let her know he would be out of town. So he set out to find his real sensei. Scene break. About 10 minutes later and Naruto still couldn't even feel a spark of her chakra within range of his sensor. He sighed and began to head to the East Village gate. He couldn't use any more time in looking for her. He was slightly worried that he couldn't feel her within the village, but he reasoned that she was probably in one of the farther training grounds or farms for a mission or training. As he was getting near to the village gates, he felt a sort of pain in his stomach at the same time that he got a little more excited. He was excited to be leaving the village because it would be the first time he would be leaving it. He was curious about the outside world and what it might look like, as he had read about many other places by now, but he hadn't been to any of them. On the other hand, he didn't want to leave his home. It was where he felt safe and secure most of the time while being able to sleep soundly. He didn't want to leave Tuchi, Ayam, his Gigi, Shikamaru, or her. Kurenai was the main reason he didn't want to leave. He felt comfortable around her and Shikamaru. The two between them had become Naruto's grounding points within his life. Kurenai was helping him get stronger while at the same time being the best friend he could ever ask for, as she advised him on various aspects of Genjutsu. Shikamaru played much the same role, only his was reversed. He acted the friend most of the time while stepping in and helping out when he saw Naruto needed it. I want them to know where I am. I especially don't want Kurenai thinking I just skipped our training. He thought to himself. Naruto started to contemplate how to let them know he would be gone, and was about to give up hope when he remembered his shadow clones. "Duh!" he said as he made his favorite hand sign and called out his jutsu. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he said as two clones popped into existence. He nodded to one of the clones, who jumped off and headed to their training clearing. The clone would wait for Kurenai and let her know what was going on as Naruto went on his mission. Likewise, the other clone walked off to where Shikamaru's favorite cloud watching area was. He nodded, satisfied his friends would know what was going on before hopping down the last rooftop to the village gates. Right on time. Scene break. As Naruto dropped down to meet his team, his sensor ability allowed him to sense that his sensei was just down the street. He looked at his teammates as his shinobi mask was placed on and his bright blue eyes became glaciers. He nodded to his two teammates, who nodded back, as he started to lean against the wall next to Sasuke while awaiting the arrival of their final team member and client. After a few minutes, Naruto saw Kakashi appear down the road with their client, and both he and Sasuke pushed off the wall as they created a line with Sakura facing their sensei. Kakashi walked up to them and nodded to them all. "Good. Have you all packed what I mentioned?" he asked, his tone obvious that he was taking this more seriously than his everyday life, as his lazy tone was absent in his voice. His genin nodded and he smiled as he said, "Very well. We will use defense formation diamond and Naruto will take point with Sasuke on Tsunade's right, while Sakura has his left, and I will bring up the rear." "Tsuna-san," Kakashi said after his genins had nodded, gaining the attention of their client. "I can promise you protection if and only if you listen immediately and without question to anything I may say. If I tell you to duck, do not hesitate to throw yourself to the ground. This is only for your protection," Kakashi said as he looked the bridge builder in the eye. Tsuna scoffed and his chest puffed out. "Who do you think you're talking to? I am the super awesome bridge builder Tsuna. Of course I know how you ninja work," he stated obnoxiously. Naruto turned a disbelieving stare on the man, which caused Kakashi to mentally chuckle as the bridge builder lost all of his pompous attitude. On the outside, Kakashi stared down at the man for a moment before nodding and turning back to his genin. With a single hand wave, the group had formed into the defensive positions around Tsuna. From a bird's eye view, the four ninja would look like a diamond with Tsuna at the focal point, hence the name. Naruto, being the point of the diamond, set the pace as the team set out from the village gates. Naruto himself was excited to be out of the village and began to walk faster than he really should, setting a rather fast pace for someone of his size. Sakura and Sasuke both almost jumped when they noticed how fast Naruto was walking, but they kept the pace when they saw that Tsuna himself wasn't having any trouble keeping the pace and even seemed pleased by it, going by the small smile that graced his lips. Kakashi whipped out his book from his pouch as he began following his fast-moving genin, his longer strides easily keeping up with them. Scene break. A little after noon and lunch, the group was still moving at a rather intense pace as Naruto hadn't slowed down after lunch. His eyes darted all around as he allowed his unconscious control of his sensor bloodline to take over, shortening his range but allowing his senses to take in the sights easier without having to split his concentration. A small, unconscious smile spread across his lips as he took in the countryside. "This is so exciting. I can't believe I am finally outside the village. This is going to be so awesome. He thought, his cold mask starting to be replaced with a happy, inquisitive childlike look. As Naruto's mood changed, so did the air around the Jonin team. Sasuke and Sakura started to relax, and even Kakashi noticed that Naruto seemed a little jumpy while up in the front. He smiled slightly behind his book. I'm glad he hasn't completely lost his curiousness, he thought to himself as he watched his team start to relax slightly along with Tsunade. Sakura, who had been thinking the whole walk, decided to voice her question now that she felt a bit more comfortable. Kakashi-sensei? She questioned. Kakashi rose his head and looked at the pink-haired kunoichi over his book. Does Wave Country have ninja? Kakashi smiled at his Genin's question. It was pretty smart to question about possible enemies in the territory they were heading. No, not in Wave Country, however. There are many countries with ninja besides just the 5 great countries. Hai no Kuni, Kaze no Kuni, Mizu no Kuni, Kaminari no Kuni, and Tsuchi no Kuni. These 5 countries, however, are the most powerful and the biggest lands which have shinobi within them. A small country, such as Wave Country, probably does not need shinobi presence as it receives little interference from these major countries. The main reason for shinobi are for military might and balancing of power. As a result, only the 5 major countries have leaders with the name of Kage, as this symbolizes their ability to lead the thousands of shinobi within the elemental countries. The 5 Kages are, supposedly, the strongest 5 shinobi within existence today. They are our own Hokage, the Kazekage, the Mizukage, the Reikage, and the Tsuchikage. Kakashi lectured as Naruto slowed his pace to listen in to his sensei's explanation. However, the shinobi do not run the country. The Kages rule over the shinobi within the lands, but they are a separate government from the daimyos. Kakashi finished. So, we shouldn't expect any other ninja? Sasuke asked in an almost disappointed tone. Kakashi turned to him and scrutinized him. This is only a C rank, so no. There should not be any foreign ninja near this mission. However, we might encounter some bandits. Kakashi said. Sasuke scoffed and Naruto returned to being on guard, his sensor ability expanding as he devoted some more of his attention to his senses. So, we shouldn't let our guard down even if there isn't any shinobi around, Kakashi warned, and the Jonin nodded as Kakashi noticed that Tsunade had stiffened up slightly when he mentioned there wouldn't be any shinobi. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed slightly. Scene break. It was later on that afternoon that Naruto felt a disturbance within his sensor. His face scrunched up in confusion as he felt 2 marks of chakra appear at the edge of his sensor ability. It was odd though, the marks would seem to waver while staying in the same place, almost as if water were flowing on top of the chakra pools that Naruto was able to detect. Naruto's pace slowed slightly as he concentrated more on those pools of chakra. His eyes remained open, but his mind seemed to analyze the pools as he walked closer and closer to it. He wondered what could cause such a phenomenon within his senses, as he had never encountered this before. As he concentrated, he noticed that there was a puddle on the path they were taking that was on the same side that Sasuke was walking. As his eyes panned around, he noticed that the ground surrounding the puddle was incredibly dry as a slight wind kicked up dust swirls across the path. His eyes narrowed slightly and his cold mask was replaced, his eyes becoming icy blue as he began to act that he hadn't seen anything, since Kakashi must have sensed this thing and he hadn't done anything. Pathetic! Naruto almost snarled in his mind at someone who dared to use his favorite type of jutsu in such a horrible way. These men will pay for making such a pathetic attempt at Genjutsu, Naruto promised himself. Spending so much time training with Genjutsu, he had become very adept at noticing when he was in a Genjutsu, especially with his bloodline. When he concentrated hard enough, he could detect any level of Genjutsu as he would sense the invading chakra in his mind's chakra coil. Unfortunately, when he did that, he was almost oblivious to the outside world, and it would allow whoever cast the Genjutsu to freely play with Naruto as he tried to detect the Genjutsu. Currently, he could sense up to low-level B-rank Genjutsu with a bit of trouble, but C-ranks were almost child's play for him. Such as this Genjutsu, he had smacked himself when he realized what the Genjutsu did. Despite all of his training with Kurenai, had still never had to sense her while she hid using Genjutsu. He nodded his head as he passed the puddle. He now knew that the Genjutsu must have been what was messing with his bloodline. He filed that bit of information away for future use as he prepared for combat. Sasuke, Sakura, and Tsunade walked right past the puddle. none of them sparing it a glance but Kakashi's lone eye glanced at it when he took a few steps right next to it. He looked back towards his genin and saw how Naruto's muscles were bunched like a coiled spring, ready to pounce when the situation called for it. He mentally smiled as he kept his facade up. Naruto's advanced at an impressive rate. I'm impressed he picked up on the Genjutsu, but he has been rather observant of late. Well, let's see what they are after and how my team works under pressure. He thought to himself as he detected the chakra signatures begin to move. Naruto felt the spike of chakra as the men appeared behind his team. He whirled around just as two men appeared, each a little farther back than Kakashi. The next thing he noticed was the look of surprise in the Jonin's face as he felt their chain wrap itself around him and Naruto begin to move from behind Tsunade. From the two men's point of view, to in front of him. Finally, he heard them, "One down," they said as the three Genin's eyes widened and the chain wrapped around Kakashi, suddenly squeezed, sending bloody bits of Kakashi splattering across the path, while Naruto appeared in front of the bridge builder, creating a triangle with his teammates. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura yelled as she broke formation and moved closer to the bridge builder, eyeing the two men with abject fear in her eyes. They got Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke was already in motion, drawing a shuriken and kunai knife. He tossed the shuriken at a tree as he launched himself into the air. Tsunade seemed to freeze in fear. Naruto's icy blue eyes unfocused as he watched the two men seem to disappear. He noticed that both of them had breathing masks on their faces covering their mouths, noses and chins with their scratched hitayatesh resting across their foreheads with metal attachments leading them to have an appearance of horns. One had spiky hair while the others fell across his head, closely resembling a mop. They both had Chunin flak jackets, symbolizing their rank, and camouflage pants leading down to their shinobi sandals. The most glaring object on the both of them, though, was the metal gauntlets that had a chain connecting the two of them. Naruto stood, motionless, as Sasuke's shuriken slammed into a tree, one of the links in the chain that connected the two men pinned to the tree as well. Sasuke reached a certain height and flung his kunai knife just as the two men began to rush forward, two down. The same man from before said as the two appeared next to Naruto. But, just as their chain began to wrap around Naruto, their chain was yanked backwards towards the tree as the kunai shortened their chain even more. Sasuke landed on the two apparent Chunin's shoulders and grabbed a hold of their chain as he kicked the both of them in the face, causing them to stumble. However, they recovered quickly as they released the chain, keeping them rooted to the tree. They both split away from each other, the spiky-haired one heading to Tsunade and Sakura, the opposite one heading towards Naruto in an attempt to take the assumed scared genin out of commission. As the spiky-haired one approached Tsunade, Sakura repeated a mantra in her head. "I have to protect the client. I have to protect the client," she thought to herself as the man closed in and she shouted, "Sir, get back!" Sakura pulled a kunai and set herself in a defensive position in front of the bridge builder, as Tsunade felt a bead of sweat roll down his face. Just as the man closed in, however, Sasuke suddenly appeared in front of the opponent, his hands already in motion to grab his own kunai. He faced the man down with determination in his black eyes. Naruto had remained motionless throughout the whole encounter, his blue eyes unfocused as he seemingly ignored the man aiming a deadly gauntlet at his unprotected side. Naruto didn't even blink as the man lunged for the kill. All of a sudden, the fight was over and Sasuke and Sakura were looking at their sensei with both enemies under his arms, both of them knocked out. Sasuke relaxed his guard as he saw his sensei appear, and Sakura looked over where Kakashi had been. Kakashi-sensei used kawarimi. Those pieces of logs sure looked convincing. "Thank Kami," she thought as she heard Tsunade let out a sigh of relief. Kakashi looked around slightly. "I expected more from you, Naruto. What happened? Did you freeze up like most do?" He questioned himself as his eye focused on the completely motionless Naruto. His eye narrowed. The blonde didn't have any guard up. "What happened?" "Sorry, Naruto. I should have helped right away. I got you injured," he said as he looked at the young genin. Seeing no response, he sighed before turning to Sasuke and Sakura. "Good job, you two, especially you, Sasuke," he said as he eye-smiled at the two. Kakashi finally turned around to Tsunade. "I need to talk to you, Tsunade-san," he said, all traces of laziness and pride absent from his voice. Sasuke smirked as he looked over to the motionless Naruto. You all right, Mr. Scaredy Cat? Sasuke asked arrogantly. Naruto suddenly moved from his place. His eyes snapped to Sasuke's, his icy blue eyes wide in amazement. Sasuke looked taken aback, until Naruto scowled. "Shut it, team," he said coldly. Sasuke merely scoffed as he turned away from him. "Naruto," Kakashi said to the now responsive Jonin. Naruto looked at him, his icy blue eyes seeming to hold a small amount of emotion, unlike normal. "Save it. Their gauntlets are poisoned. We need to reopen your wound and drain the poisoned blood. Don't move around too much, it may spread," Kakashi counseled. Naruto looked at the small scratch on his hand and shrugged as he grabbed a kunai and sliced it back open, his blood pouring out of the newly made wound. His team watched in amazement as Naruto simply waited until he saw that his blood was red and his wound suddenly sealed up. Naruto grunted and wiped his hand clean. "Naruto, what the hell did you do that for?" Sakura almost yelled, concern for her teammate causing her to ask a rather obvious question. "To drain the poison, though I wouldn't have done it that way. Good job, Naruto," Kakashi said as he looked at the blonde's already healed hand. "Is that the fox, or does he naturally heal that fast?" he asked himself. Anyways, these guys are Chunin-level shinobi from Mizugakure, and they are known for not giving up when fighting. Now, I'm sure you HD your reasons, but we are operating outside of mission parameters, and we are well within our rights to return to the village Tsunade-san. Kakashi finished as he looked at Tsunade. Tsunade paled and nodded. "It's true. This mission is probably more than what you knew about, but I had no choice. I have a super bad guy coming after me. His name is quite famous," Tsunade said. "Who?" Kakashi questioned. "The wealthy shipping magnate Gatu," Tsunade said with a sigh and hatred in his voice, catching the attention of the genin. "The guy who is said to be one of the few wealthy people in the world?" Kakashi asked with slight surprise in his voice. Tsunade nodded. "Yes, legally he owns and manages a shipping business. But illegally, he sells drugs and other illegal items to others and uses ninja and gangs to take places over. About a year ago, he set his sights on our small country and quickly took control over all of our shipping companies. He has complete control over what enters and leaves the country. The only opponent to his control is the completion of my bridge," Tsunade said. "So, you're in the way?" Sakura asked. "And Gata hired these ninja to take you out?" Sasuke supplied. Tsunade nodded. "We are super poor. Even the feudal lord is. We didn't have the funds necessary for an expensive B rank. I could only afford a C rank mission," he said. But if you quit now, I will definitely die. It won't be a problem. It's only that my super cute little grandson will cry for days when he finds out," he said as he laughed uproariously. "And my super beautiful daughter will just hate Konoha Ninja forever. But it won't be your fault. Not at all," he said as he turned away from them with a gleam in his eye. The whole team's sweat dropped as they looked at the man with a deadpan expression, as Kakashi thought to himself, "Yeah, 'cause now we can totally turn down the mission with a clear conscience, you damn old man." Kakashi sighed as he said, "Well, I guess we can escort you to your country," he conceded. Tsunade's eyes gleamed in victory as he nodded solemnly. Naruto moved forward and took his spot in the front of the group as the other ninja fell back into position and Naruto began to move again. Scene break. Later that day, Tsunade suddenly spoke. "We are close to the boat. I had a close friend of mine offer to smuggle us into the country," he explained. The team nodded as Naruto sensed a person about 6 yards out. He tensed slightly, but when the man became visible through the mist that had creeped up on the shoreline, he relaxed slightly, though his guard was still up as he finally spoke since their confrontation with the two Chunin. "Is that your friend, Tsunade-san?" Naruto questioned as he pointed out the outline that had become clearer in the mist. "Yes," Tsunade responded as the team approached the boat. "Ah, Tsunade, it's good to see you again," the man called out. Tsunade nodded to the man while responding. "Yes. Well, this is the team that has protected me, so can you carry us across?" he asked. The ferryman nodded, and the team plus Tsunade scrambled on board the boat as the man pushed off the shore and began to push his way across the expanse of misty water. As they took the boat across the water, Naruto thought back to the fight they had been. He cursed himself for losing focus like that, but he really couldn't help it, After all, how could he have known that Kage Bunshin were perfect scouting material? Scene break. Flashback. Naruto watched as the two Chunin tore apart his sensei's body, when he suddenly felt an out-of-body experience assault his mind. Naruto watched as if from his own clone's eyes as he nodded to himself right before he jumped away, intent to head to his training area to explain to Kurenai what his original was going to do. As he ran, he noticed that he was a bit slower than normal and that his sensor seemed to be weakened. But he ignored this as he began to jump around the rooftops heading to the training ground. After about 10 minutes of running, he reached their usual training ground and sat there pondering what he should do while he waited for Kurenai to show up. After going through a myriad of ideas, he finally decided to try and test his sensor again, since it had felt weaker. As he tested it, he found that it did indeed seem weaker. Where his original had almost 15 yards when he concentrated, the most he could get was 5 yards. When he was on guard, that dropped to about a yard, and when he wasn't actively trying to look, he couldn't sense anything. The clone sighed in exasperation as he sat in the training clearing. He was bored beyond belief. It had been hours since he had started to wait, and he estimated there was still another hour before Kurenai would show up. He felt his stomach grumble in hunger, but he was just a clone, so he wasn't going to eat anything. It would be a waste of food. The clone decided it would eat these berries surrounding the clearing since he wasn't going to pay for anything, even if it really wanted ramen. So, it ate some berries it picked from the nearby bushes as it waited. He suddenly heard some rustling of leaves behind him and swiveled in place, his hand going to his kunai pouch since he couldn't sense who it was. He relaxed and finished chewing his berry when he saw Kurenai standing in place with a quirked eyebrow signifying her question. Naruto chuckled. "Sorry, Kurenai. I was a bit hungry," he said as he rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. "That's okay, but could you tell me why you are a clone instead of the real one, Naruto?" she questioned. "Knew I couldn't hide that." The clone muttered to himself. Yeah. Actually, the boss team got assigned a C rank and he will be out of the village for about a month. He didn't want you to think he would just skip training, so he sent me to tell you." The clone told Kurenai, who nodded and suddenly slapped her forehead. "Damn it. I knew I forgot to tell Hokage-sama something," she muttered. Naruto nodded and supplied. "You forgot to tell Gigi about Kakashi's teaching habits, didn't you?" he asked. Kurenai smiled hesitantly. Naruto sighed as he shook his head. "Count on you to forget to mention something so important," Naruto said as he hid the smile that was trying to creep up onto his face. Kurenai's face turned pink in embarrassment and anger. "It was only that one thing," she said indignantly. Naruto's clone burst into laughing as he saw Kurenai's face turn into a slight pout. He loved it when he could get under her skin. She always pouted when he managed to do so, which just caused him to do it every chance he could. The way her wine-red eyes seemed to shine with a sense of pleading, the way her red lips stuck out slightly, and her cheeks puffed slightly, it was so adorable. Even though he wouldn't admit it, he found her pout to be one of the cutest things he had ever seen. He could see why men always fell prey to women pouting at them. Since he had never really had anyone pout at him before, he had almost passed out when she first did it. But from then on, he tried to get her to pout whenever he could as he loved the sight. When his laughing had subsided, he looked up at Kurenai, who was still slightly pouting, causing a minor blush to come to his face before he said, "Well, maybe you should go tell Gigi now. He might send us reinforcements," he suggested, to which Kurenai looked up and nodded. "I will do that," she said as she looked at him, and suddenly her countenance changed as she looked at his clone. "And Naruto," she said softly as she leaned down and looked his clone in the eye. His blush came back full force as he looked into her wine-red eyes. "Don't die," she said quietly. "Please," she added almost pleadingly before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. The clone blushed for a good 5 minutes before shaking his head and dispelling himself. His job finished. Scene break. Naruto shook his head as the mere memory sent a thrill through his body that had him blushing. He blinked and banished the blood from his head as he looked up when the boatman spoke. The bridge should be appearing soon. Just as he spoke, a looming structure appeared within the mist. Naruto craned his head back to be able to see the top of the bridge. "That's pretty big," he said a bit loudly to be able to be heard. The boatman shushed him. "Quiet! If we are heard, Gatu would tear us to pieces. Why do you think that we are traveling undercover?" He hissed at Naruto. Naruto's icy blue eyes turned to him, and the boatman shivered before returning to controlling the boat. As loath as I am to agree, the dobe is right, Sasuke said quietly. Sakura nodded as Kakashi looked up at the bridge with them. Tsunade seemed to beam in pride. We are going to take the vegetation route, Tsunade. It'll make us harder to spot, the boatman told the bridge builder, who nodded. About 20 minutes later, the boat pulled up next to a dock and the team disembarked. The boatman waved to Tsunade before taking off again, quickly disappearing in the mist. Diamond formation team, Kakashi said, and the team formed back up around Tsunade. They set off towards the ground. Naruto's sensor was going full blast as he concentrated almost solely on his path and his senses. He was going to be prepared for another attack. It wasn't another 10 minutes later, when Naruto quickly took out a shuriken and tossed it into the bushes as he signaled his team to halt. His sensor had picked up a chakra signature on the edge of his field. Naruto stalked forward and pushed the bushes aside. Instead of a person, he saw that there was a cowering white bunny. Naruto, look what you did! Sakura yelled as she rushed forward and grabbed the poor bunny in a hug as she tried to comfort it. Naruto and Kakashi's eyes narrowed, however. Naruto suddenly closed his eyes and allowed his concentration to slip completely towards his sensor. That bunny is white, but it's spring. The coat should be brown. This has been kept in a cage for Kawarimi. They're already here, Kakashi thought to himself as he began to sense around for chakra. Naruto's eyes snapped open as Kakashi spun around, both looking at a tree branch before yelling simultaneously, "Down!" The 5 people instantly hit the ground, with Sakura being dragged by Naruto since she was preoccupied with the rabbit. All of them narrowly being missed by the huge flying sword that had just embedded itself into another tree. The people looked up and noticed that there was another in their presence as they struggled back to their feet. The man had spiky black hair with a scratched Mizu Hitai 8, signifying his Misen Nin status. He had bandages wrapped around his mouth which extended to his neck. He wore no shirt, leaving his torso exposed to the elements, but on his legs and arms were long warmers. He wore striped pants which disappeared under the warmers and then gave way to his shinobi sandals. Naruto felt his sensor take stock of the man's chakra pool and almost felt his composure break. This guy had chakra rivaling Kakashi. His icy blue eyes shone with a gleam of fear as he looked up at the man. He noticed that the man must be rather strong since he was obviously the wielder of the huge Zanbatsu he was standing on. He assumed that the man was a swordsman which specialized in close quarters combat with his Genjutsu and a possible water affinity because of his water Hitai 8. Naruto knew he stood no chance against this person, and so he moved closer to Tsunade in order to hopefully delay any attack the man may launch. Kakashi narrowed his eyes at the newcomer as he sensed Naruto move closer to the client, still tensed. "Good job, Naruto, that first fight must have cleared you up," he thought as he said, "Momochi Zabuza, missing Nin of Mizugakure. This guy is on a whole nother level. Get back and protect the client," he said to his team as he faced his opponent, his laziness falling off his shoulders as easily as Naruto changed his own countenances and showing another side of Kakashi. Kakashi no Sharingan, the copy ninja of Konoha. The man said to have copied over 1,000 jutsu. No wonder the demon brothers never stood a chance. "But the bridge builder is mine, Kakashi," Zabuza said. "Sharingan," both Sasuke and Naruto thought as they looked at their sensei in confusion. Kakashi ignored both of his students' stares as he rose his headband to show his left eye, revealing an eye with a red sclera, black pupil, and 3 black tomos. Naruto's eyes widened as he finally witnessed the legendary Jujutsu of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke's hands clenched in anger. "Sharingan? What's that do?" Sakura asked. She knew of the bloodline, but she didn't know what it did. Naruto opened his mouth to answer, as his eyes left his sensei's face and traveled back to the opponent. "Ah, the Sharingan, I get to see it so early. I'm honored," Zabuza said mockingly. "It is said some eyes have the power to defeat any Nin, Gen, or Taijutsu style. The Sharingan is one of these. But that's not all," Sasuke answered. "That's right, the most feared ability of the Sharingan is that it can copy its opponent's abilities and make it their own," Zabuza finished. "When I was on Mist's assassination team, your name was one that was feared, Kakashi. But it seems you have met your match. I need that bridge builder dead." he said as he jumped and grabbed his sword from the tree. It seems I will have to beat you first, he said as he disappeared in a burst of speed. The three genin fell into a protection formation around Tsunade with their kunais out. Naruto's sensor ability flared itself to his maximum, searching for the man's next appearance as he slowly and discreetly attempted to lean down and undo his leg weights. Naruto turned to the water as Kakashi spoke. On top of the water, Kakashi's eye narrowed. He's releasing quite a bit of chakra, he thought to himself. Naruto finally reached his weights and pressed the release. The two weighted bracers he had on his legs suddenly released and plopped to the ground right when Zabuza said, Ninpo, Kirigakure no Jutsu. The small thumps that his weights made were muffled by the man speaking, and Naruto sighed softly in relief as he stood back up and noticed that the mist that was rolling in had minuscule amounts of chakra within it. 8 choices. Zabuza's disembodied voice floated through the mist. Liver, lung, spine, clavicle vein, neck vein, brain, kidneys, and heart. Which should I choose? He questioned from his position within the mist. Kakashi spoke then. Zabuza was a master of silent killing. Keep on guard. All of a sudden, the three genin felt the killer intent of both their sensei and enemy shoot up. Sasuke and Sakura began to shake as Naruto felt a bead of sweat make its way down his face. He had faced all of Kurenai's Ki before, and he was a little more accustomed to Ki than his teammates. This is two Jonin doing battle? Sasuke questioned. The air is so heavy, one could go mad in here. I almost want to end it just to be away from here, he thought to himself as he felt his hand shakily raise his kunai. Naruto's hand shot out and grabbed his teammates as Kakashi spoke. Don't worry, I won't allow any of my comrades to die, he said as he smiled at them. We'll see about that, Zabuza's voice said, as he appeared near the genin. Kakashi moved fast, but Naruto's reflexes had been honed by his spars, and the slight chakra spike allowed his hand to be moving just as Zabuza appeared. Zabuza's shocked eyes were the only thing Kakashi saw as he looked down to see Naruto's kunai plunged into the man's chest. Splash. The clone made as the water clone dispelled from Naruto's strike. Naruto himself was trying to keep his head straight as he felt multiple spikes of chakra within his range. How'd you manage that, Naruto? Kakashi thought to himself as he saw Zabuza appear and slash Kakashi's water clone. It's over, Kakashi said as he appeared behind Zabuza with a kunai to the man's neck. Zabuza looked down at Naruto with an appraising look before he burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, you had your clone talk while hiding in the mist, good plan. But, the clone said as it splashed into water itself and Zabuza appeared behind Kakashi. I'm not that easy either, he said as he appeared behind Kakashi with his zanbato cocked back ready to be swung. Kakashi ducked just as Zabuza brought around his zanbato to bifurcate Kakashi. Zabuza continued his spinning motion, bringing his zanbato down into the ground behind himself as he steadied his hand against the hilt and pushed off of it to kick Kakashi as he attempted to rise from his dodge. Kakashi was hit and flew through the air towards the lake that Zabuza had been standing on before. Foolish, Zabuza said before he disappeared and appeared behind the struggling Kakashi in the water, standing on the water himself. This water is heavy, Kakashi thought to himself before his eyes widened and he attempted to speed away from the chakra signature behind him. You're done. Suiro no Jutsu. 1. Zabuza said as a bubble of water surrounded Kakashi with Zabuza's hand stuck in it. Kakashi looked on, horrified that he had been caught. Now, we can finish our fight later, Kakashi. Time I deal with your brats. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 2. Zabuza said as he created a hand sign and the water formed into a replica of himself. You brats, wearing those headbands and parading around like you are ninja. Real ninja are those who have survived numerous brushes with death. The Bunshin was fully formed by now. Only when you can be listed in my handbook can you be called real ninjas. You are no dash. Zabuza started only to have his facial muscle twitch when his Bunshin was destroyed. Hey, eyebrowless, Naruto said coldly. Don't underestimate us, you might just get yourself killed. He threatened as he looked over at the real Zabuza from where he was standing after throwing his kunai. Zabuza scoffed. Don't try to intimidate me, kid. You can't do shit, he said as he created another clone. Sasuke, I have a plan. Naruto said, his cold eyes never leaving the Zabuza clone. Sasuke scoffed. Teamwork after that display, Naruto? He questioned. Let's go wild. Naruto said, a look of excitement breaking through his cold facade. That Naruto, I was going to tell them to run. But he makes me believe he can beat this guy. Kakashi thought as he looked at his team, or at least get me out of here. He thought to himself as he settled for giving Zabuza a smirk. Sakura, take Tsunade back a bit. We need him out of the way. Sorry, old man. Naruto said. Tsunade merely grinned. That's okay. I caused this. Fight to your super little heart's content. He said as he began to back up slowly with Sakura. You ready? Naruto said as he turned one eye on his teammate. Sasuke grunted and both of them turned to face Zabuza's clone. They were tensed and ready for action when the clone suddenly burst out laughing. It grew uproariously until Zabuza finally spoke. You still trying to play little ninja? So you destroyed my other clone. Big deal, it won't happen again. The clone said with a dark tone to its voice. When I was your age, my hands were already dyed blood with red. He said, drawing some shocked looks from Sasuke, Sakura, and Tsunade. Naruto merely twitched as Kakashi's eyes widened. Devil Zabuza, he whispered. Ah, you have heard of it. Yes, back when Mizugakure was known as the Bloody Mist Village. Our graduation exam. Zabuza started to chuckle almost dementedly. Fighting to the death between the students, only the winner becoming a genin. It was glorious. So much blood. Zabuza raised his voice in excitement. Sasuke and Sakura looked disgusted as Kakashi elaborated. It was changed after a devil appeared in their midst. A boy, who had no ninja training, appeared and slaughtered the whole class. Hundreds of students massacred. It was so much fun, Zabuza said as he turned his nearly demented gaze onto Sasuke and Naruto. Naruto merely stared the man down. Years of glares and hidden wishes of death and pain had numbed him to such looks. Sasuke, however, was not nearly as well adjusted and his eyes widened in surprise when Zabuza suddenly appeared in front of him, sending him flying with a vicious punch. Sasuke recovered well though. He attempted to grab the clone's shoulder, but the clone noticed the action and sent Sasuke flying into the ground with a nasty backhanded punch to the stomach, causing Sasuke to cough blood and attempt to roll away from him. Naruto grit his teeth and shot forward. His regular Chunin speed slower than his maximum, but he figured it would surprise the clone enough for what he had in mind. It worked. The clone was surprised and Naruto's kunai almost made it to the clone's side, but it was batted away by the massive Zanbato. Naruto grimaced and jumped back as he noticed Sasuke had moved away during his slight tussle with the clone. Catch! He yelled and tossed a folded windmill shuriken to Sasuke. Sasuke's smirk went unnoticed as he unfolded it. The clone scoffed when Sasuke tossed the windmill shuriken at the clone. A shuriken won't work on me, it said, but was surprised when the shuriken veered from the clone and headed for the original that was standing on the water. Good plan, but that's not going to work, Zabuza said as he grabbed the shuriken from the air. His eyes widened as he noticed a second shuriken in the shadow of the first. Kage Shuriken no Jutsu, 3. Sasuke said as his smirk returned full force. Zabuza looked unsteady for a moment before simply hopping over the second shuriken. Very good plan, but still not enough to grab me, brat. Are you sure about that? Sasuke said as he smirked from his position. Suddenly, the second shuriken poofed into smoke before showing a grinning Naruto with a kunai in his hand. He smirked as he tossed the kunai straight at the still airborne Zabuza. Zabuza watched as the kunai approached and pulled his hand out of the water orb just as the kunai would have plunged into his arm. But he didn't expect it to graze and cut his cheek as it passed by. Zabuza turned back to the Naruto in the water, his eyes burning with hatred at being harmed by a mere brat. He threw the windmill shuriken at the boy who was grinning like a fool at him in pure rage. The entire team watched in shock as Kakashi almost blocked the throw. Then, they watched as the windmill sped towards Naruto, whose expression turned into fear at the weapon's course. Naruto! Kakashi yelled out, just as the windmill splashed into the water. The grinning Naruto returned as the shuriken hit the water. Fooled ya, he said before dispelling in a puff of smoke, and a splash of water was heard from the shore. Zabuza looked, infuriated, at the shore to see another Naruto. this one showing little emotion through his icy blue eyes as he stood over the puddle that had been his clone. Zabuza suddenly scoffed, "Heh! I got distracted and released the jutsu," he said in an uncaring tone, though his eyes bored into Naruto's own. "Wrong!" Kakashi almost yelled. "You were forced to release the jutsu by brats you say aren't even ninja," he said, causing his genin to swell with pride. "And I don't fall for the same trick twice," he said menacingly as the two Jonin jumped apart from each other and began their seals for a jutsu. The genin and civilian watched entranced as the two went through the same hand signs in a matter of seconds. Naruto could feel the buildup of chakra that the two were using. His eyes narrowed as he thought he felt another signature appear at the edge of his field of sensor, but the huge amount of chakra being used next to him negated his perception. The two Jounin finished their hand signs at almost the exact same time. They spoke simultaneously, "Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu." 4. They both said as dragons made of water rose from behind their respective casters and clashed in a mighty explosion of water that left the lake rippling with waves in aftershock. Those on the shore held their ground as water rushed up from the aftershock and began to billow around their feet. When the water cleared, the Genin and Tsunade watched as Zabuza and Kakashi struggled on top of the water, stuck in a stalemate between the Zanbato and Kunai knife. They both separated and began to mirror each other's movements perfectly. Zabuza's eyes were wide in surprise as Kakashi spoke, "Reading them," he said, and Zabuza seemed unnerved. They began their mirroring dance again, and not long after Kakashi spoke again. "Freaky Eye is pissing me off, right?" he questioned, though he didn't seem to need an answer as Zabuza's wide eye was enough of a reply. Zabuza's bloodshot eyes suddenly narrowed. "Heh! All you're doing is copying me. Dash. You can't beat me, you monkey bastard," Kakashi finished. It seemed to strike a mark within Zabuza because he started to do hand signs much faster, his hands a blur to anyone but Kakashi. "Damn you! I'll make it so, Dash. You can never open that mouth again," Kakashi finished for him again. If anyone watched closely enough, they could see Kakashi's tomos whirling around his pupil. Zabuza seemed a bit more unnerved and his seals slowed slightly as Kakashi finished his own a second before Zabuza. "Suetun, Daibakufu no Jutsu." 5. Kakashi said calmly as Zabuza's eyes widened and he was washed away in a huge torrent of water. The next thing they saw was Kakashi tossing kunai in the direction Zabuza had went and hearing them tearing into his flesh as they saw him being pinned to a tree. "It's over." Zabuza was shaking slightly as he turned a disbelieving eye up to Kakashi, who was standing on a branch. "Can you see the future?" he asked hesitantly. Kakashi looked back at his opponent. "Yes, your future is death," he said as he began to toss a kunai, but two sunban suddenly appeared in Zabuza's neck. Kakashi looked up to see a hunter ninja dressed in a black kimono with blue trimming. The person's face was covered with a white mask with the symbol of Kirigakure on the top of it. Two bangs fell in front of the mask with the rest of it tied behind the person's back. A scarf-like piece of cloth was tied as a belt around the person's waist and the person had sandals on. Since no skin could be shown, Kakashi couldn't tell what gender this person was. "Hee, you were right, he is dead," the person giggled behind their mask. Naruto moved closer to the bridge builder while eyeing the person in a mask warily. He sensed this person before when he had caught the person right before Kakashi and Zabuza started to use those huge amounts of chakra. He didn't trust the hunter. Kakashi disappeared and appeared over Zabuza's dead body, checking for a pulse. He nodded, satisfied that the ninja was dead as he turned a look to the hunter ninja. "Thank you very much for your help. I have been searching for a chance to kill Zabuza for quite some time," the ninja said in a respectful tone. "You're a Kirigakure hunter nin?" Kakashi asked. "Very astute. Yes, my duty is to hunt down Missing Nin," the person replied. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. From this person's height and sound of the voice, he's not much older than Naruto, but he's a hunter nin. Impressive. Kakashi nodded as he moved over to where his team was. "Your battle is now over and I must dispose of this body. Farewell," the Kirigakure hunter nin said before appearing near the body and vanishing in a swirl of mist. "In this world, there are kids younger than you that are stronger than me." Kakashi spoke to his genin team's shocked expressions. Remember that when you start to underestimate someone younger than yourself, he said as he lowered his Hitai again. Now, let's get Tsunade-san home. Ha 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 ha. Sure. Let's let you all relax at my house. Tsunade laughed uproariously. Kakashi suddenly face-planted onto the ground as he felt the strain taken on his body by the Sharingan. Sensei! Sakura yelled as she ran forward and began a diagnostic jutsu as Sasuke appeared next to her in a defensive post-ion with Naruto doing the same near Tsunade. She let out a sigh of relief moments later. He's fine. Just Ig's wasted. Let's get him to Tsunade's place, she said, and the boys nodded while grabbing their sensei. Naruto hoisted his sensei's arm with Sasuke under the other, and they began the trek to Tsunade's home. Naruto's mind reeling at the information he had obtained. That kid's chakra felt unique. I wonder why, he questioned as he shrugged his shoulders and began walking away from his first real battle at a Jonin level.